Rob Pelinka just hung up the phone with Dallas, and what he's about to pull off is so calculated, so perfectly timed, that when this trade gets announced, the entire basketball world is going to realize the Lakers aren't just competing. We're hunting banner number 18 with serious intent. Welcome back to the Lakers News Fan Report, the only place where you get unfiltered truth, insider intelligence, and the kind of deep analysis that respects your basketball IQ. I'm about to break down a trade that's been brewing behind closed doors for weeks, involving a player who most casual fans aren't talking about, but who could be the exact missing piece that transforms our front court from a liability into a legitimate weapon. This isn't clickbait. This isn't speculation pulled from thin air. This is real reporting based on league sources who have direct knowledge of ongoing negotiations between the Lakers and a Western Conference team that's in complete chaos right now. Stay locked in because by the end of this video, you're going to understand the strategic brilliance of what Rob Pelinka is orchestrating, why this particular player makes infinitely more sense than the big names everyone else is chasing, and most importantly, how this move positions us to dominate the playoffs when it matters most. Let me set the stage for you because context is everything when evaluating trades. The Lakers are currently sitting in a solid playoff position. LeBron is defying Father Time with performances that would be All-NBA caliber for someone 10 years younger. Anthony Davis is playing at an MVP level on both ends of the floor, and J.J. Redick has implemented an offensive system that's got us scoring efficiently and moving the ball with purpose. But there's one glaring vulnerability that keeps me up at night. One weakness that smart playoff coaches will absolutely exploit if we don't address it. Our frontcourt depth behind Anthony Davis is questionable at best. Jackson Hayes has flashes of athleticism, but disappears for stretches. Christian Wood provides offensive versatility, but gets hunted on defense when AD sits or when he inevitably deals with the bumps and bruises of an 80-game grind. We don't have a reliable rim protector who can maintain our defensive intensity. That's a problem. And Rob Pelinka knows it's a problem, which is why he's been working the phones trying to find a solution that doesn't cost us our future. Enter the Dallas Mavericks, a franchise that's currently experiencing an identity crisis. After making the finals last year and coming within striking distance of a championship, they expected to build on that success this season. Instead, they stumbled out of the gate with a brutal 3-7 start that has their front office questioning everything about their roster construction. The chemistry isn't there, the defensive intensity has vanished, and suddenly players who were untouchable 6 months ago are now very much available. If the right offer comes along, one of those players is Daniel Gafford, their 27-year-old athletic center who signed a 3-year, $54 million contract Kuntixens, nowhere where it gets for Frikwiktieri, Wendelaska Vigantort, Themi Specificalitaric eligible through FIFA 5 Trata Deadline. That's not an accident. That's not an oversight. That's intentional Stolicslele, Thessaverix Teffentifim, Gafford, and Tiwanti Dodontofintizanen. Well, Flezison has Wufla Starist, and League Wesor Kerkentorif's availability. Them Averixevent being actively shipping, but the realistending tufers, in specially Fofter Festerf, recreation and bull handling. Thin Estepa Portwentary, and from everything I'm hearing, he's preparing Toma Folofstri. Before every Dolig Tolitar, let me explain Nephalifalififiste, standing 610 with a 7-3 weeks Banani. Lit athleticism, Gaffa 4 Dissony Fiffintism, last season Withels, and Thista de Sabin duly blowing. Hesh at 70.55 for million contract extension back in June. Now here's where it gets really interesting from a Lakers perspective. When Dallas gave Gafford that extension, they specifically structured the deal to keep him trade eligible through the February 5th trade deadline. That's not an accident. That's not an oversight. That's intentional roster flexibility built into the contract. The Mavericks knew they might field trade interest in Gafford, and they wanted to keep their options open depending on how the season unfolded. Well, the season has unfolded disastrously for Dallas, and league sources are now confirming that multiple teams have inquired about Gafford's availability. The Mavericks haven't been actively shopping him, but they're listening to offers, especially if those offers help them address their more pressing needs like perimeter creation and ball handling. This is the opportunity Rob Pelinka has been waiting for, and from everything I'm hearing, he's preparing to make a serious push to bring Gafford to Los Angeles. Before I break down what a potential trade package would look like, let me explain exactly why Daniel Gafford is the perfect fit for what we need. Standing 6 feet 10 with a 7 feet 3 wingspan and elite athleticism, Gafford is one of the most efficient finishers in the entire NBA last season with Dallas. And this stat is absolutely mind-blowing. He shot 70.5% from the field. That's not a typo, 70.5%, which ranked first among all players who attempted at least 200 field goals during the season. He's an elite lob threat who finishes above the rim with authority. He's an excellent screen setter who creates space for ball handlers. And he averaged 1.6 blocks per game in just 21 minutes of play. In time, those numbers would obviously increase with more minutes. And playing alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis would make him even more effective than he was in Dallas. Think about the offensive possibilities for a moment. LeBron James is one of the greatest facilitators in basketball history. His court vision and passing ability are legendary. And he's made a Hall of Fame career out of making his teammates better. Athletic big men who can catch lobs and finish around the rim have always thrived playing with LeBron. We saw it with JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard during our 2020 championship run. We saw it with Chris Bosh adjusting his game in Miami. We saw it throughout his Cleveland years with various centers who had career performances catching passes from number 23. Gafford fits that exact profile. And the pick-and-roll combinations between LeBron and Gafford would be virtually unstoppable. Imagine LeBron attacking downhill, drawing to defenders, and hitting Gafford with a perfectly timed lob for an easy dunk. That's the points every single time. And there's nothing the defense can do about it when the execution is clean. On the defensive end, and this is where the impact becomes even more significant, Gafford's rim protection would allow Anthony Davis more freedom to roam, to help on the perimeter, to switch onto smaller players without constantly worrying about leaving the basket completely exposed. AD is an elite defender, arguably the best defensive player in the league when he's locked in. But he can't be everywhere at once. Having another legitimate rim protector who can contest shots, alter attempts, and clean up defensive breakdowns would transform our entire defensive scheme. Our perimeter defenders could play more aggressively on ball handlers, knowing they have dual rim protection behind them. We could switch more freely on screens without creating mismatches that lead to easy baskets. Against elite offensive teams like Denver with Nikola Jokic or Phoenix with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, having the ability to throw multiple defensive looks and maintain rim protection regardless of who's on the floor would be an enormous strategic advantage. Now let's talk about what a realistic trade package would look like and whether the cost makes sense given our championship timeline. Based on conversations with league sources and analyzing the salary cap mathematics that have to work for both sides, a reasonable framework would involve the Lakers sending Jackson Hayes, a 2025 second-round pick, and a 2027 first-round pick with light protections to Dallas in exchange for Daniel Gafford. Some of you might be thinking that's too much to give up for a backup center, but let me explain why this trade makes perfect sense from a Lakers perspective, and why Gafford is worth significantly more than his current role suggests. First, Jackson Hayes hasn't developed into the consistent contributor we hoped he'd become when we signed him. He's shown flashes of athleticism and offensive potential, but the consistency isn't there. And at 24 years old, he is what he is at this point. For Dallas, Hayes represents a younger, cheaper option who still has theoretical upside and could benefit from a change of scenery. Second, the draft picks we'd be giving up are future assets, and while draft picks have value, they're also inherently uncertain. You don't know if that 2027 first-rounder turns into a star, a role player, or a complete bust. What you do know is that Daniel Gafford is a proven NBA player who can help you win games right now. When you're the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James at 39 years old still playing at an elite level, and Anthony Davis in his absolute prime, you make that trade every single time. Without hesitation, our championship window is now, not 3 years from now when that draft pick conveys. Third, Gafford's contract is extremely reasonable at roughly 50 for point per million contract. Nowheres where it gets verfrikteri, when Alaska Vigentort. Themi specificala terigt eligible through FIFA 5 trata deadline. That's no accident, that's no oversight, that's intentionaura stuliksliel, that averix na 5 finten. Et the wantido donto fintizenen. Well, Flezisen has Wunflastarist, a league Wesor Kerkentorif's availability. Them averixivent being activleshiping, but the real extending twofers, especially fifth Torif's handling. This is the apport tulibi. Kahesbin Waidinger, and from everything I'm hearing, he's preparing to McAuliffeaston. jellies. Before we break tar, let me explain efalifalififist. Standing 6'10" with a 7'3" wingspan and delatechalichuk. Gaffer 4 fiffintism last season withals. And this is a sabin duly blowing. Hesha 70.518 million per year for the next 3 seasons. That's not an albatross deal that restricts our future flexibility. That's a fair market value contract for a starting caliber center in today's NBA. We're not taking on long-term salary cap problems. We're adding a player in his prime years with multiple years of team control, which means he can contribute not just this season, but potentially into whatever the next era of Lakers basketball look like after LeBron eventually retires. The financial structure works for both organizations, and that's critical for getting a deal done. For Dallas, they'd be shedding a contract that's become somewhat redundant given their frontcourt logjam, with Derek Lively to emerging as their center of the future. They'd be adding draft capital that helps with future roster construction and gives them ammunition to make other moves. They'd be getting a younger player in Hayes who fits their timeline better, and most importantly, they'd be creating financial and roster flexibility to address their actual needs, which are perimeter shot creation and ball handling. Their general manager Nico Harrison is under serious pressure after the disappointing start to the season, and making a trade that addresses multiple roster issues while moving a player who's become expendable would be viewed as proactive, intelligent management. Now let's talk about how Gafford would fit into J.J. Redick's system and what his role would realistically look like on a game-to-game basis. J.J. has implemented an offensive philosophy that emphasizes pace, ball movement, spacing, and creating high-percentage looks at the rim through player movement and smart screening actions. Gafford thrives in exactly that kind of system because he doesn't need plays called for him. He doesn't require post touches to be effective. He impacts winning through effort plays, offensive rebounds, putbacks, transition finishes, and capitalizing on opportunities created by others. That's the perfect complementary skill set for a team built around the superstars who command most of the offensive attention in terms of rotation minutes. I envision Gafford playing anywhere from 20 to 28 minutes per game depending on matchups and game flow. He primarily spell Anthony Davis at the 5 when AD needs rest, but there would also be situational lineups where they play together, particularly against teams with dominant big men, where we want to establish physical presence in the paint and control the glass. Against Denver, we could go big with both AD and Gafford to combat Jokic's size and passing. Against smaller, more perimeter-oriented teams like Golden State, we'd stick with AD at the 5 and bring Gafford off the bench to provide energy and rim protection. The versatility that his addition provides J.J. Redick in terms of lineup combinations, matchup adjustments, and tactical flexibility cannot be overstated. The defensive impact would be immediate and measurable. The Lakers currently rank around 12th in the league in opponent field goal percentage at the rim, which is decent, but not elite. Adding Gafford alongside AD would almost certainly push us into the top 5 in that category. And rim protection is one of the most valuable defensive skills in basketball because it impacts every single possession. Opponents would think twice before attacking the paint. Our help defense would improve because we'd have to elite shot blockers instead of one. And our overall defensive rating would see significant improvement. Championship teams are built on defense, and this move would give us the defensive foundation necessary to compete with anyone in a 7-game series. The timing of this potential trade is also perfect because we're approaching the midpoint of the season, which means Gafford would have roughly 2.5 months to integrate into our system, build chemistry with LeBron and AD, learn J.J.'s playbook, and be fully comfortable in his role by the time April rolls around and the playoffs begin. Chemistry and continuity matter enormously in postseason basketball, where possessions are more valuable, defensive schemes are more complex, and every advantage matters. Compare that to making a desperation move at the deadline in late February where a new player has maybe 6 weeks to adjust, and you can see why acting sooner rather than later makes strategic sense. Rob Pelinka understands this, which is why he's been working on this deal for weeks rather than waiting until the last minute. Beyond the on-court impact, there are significant psychological and organizational benefits to making this trade. Now I genuinely want to hear from you, the passionate, knowledgeable fans who make up Laker Nation. How do you feel about the possibility of trading for Daniel Gafford? Does he excite you as a potential addition to our frontcourt rotation? What would you be willing to give up in terms of draft picks and young players to make this happen? Do you trust Rob Pelinka to negotiate a fair deal and close this transaction? Are there other players you'd prefer we target instead? Drop your honest thoughts, your analysis, your questions, and your concerns in the comments below, because this community thrives on intelligent basketball discussion. And I genuinely value your perspective on these franchise-altering decisions. And listen carefully, because this is important. If you want to stay ahead of every development, every trade rumor, every roster move, and every strategic decision that impacts our beloved Los Angeles Lakers, you absolutely must subscribe to this channel right now and turn on post notifications. The Lakers News Fan Report is your most trusted source for breaking news, insider information, detailed analysis, and comprehensive coverage that respects your intelligence as a basketball fan. We're here every single day bringing you content that matters, insights that make sense, and a passion that matches your own love for this historic franchise. Lakers Nation, let's go get Banner 18 together.